previous video, we looked into what is an array. Now we will look into what is an array list. Array list is part of the collection framework and it provides dynamic arrays. Like arrays, it stores the similar data type values, but unlike arrays, it is dynamic. So let's see what's the difference between an array and an array list. Array is a fixed length data structure. We have seen in the previous video how to define an array and how to initialize an array. We have to give the length of the array during the time of definition. Unlike array, array list is dynamic. So you don't have to mention the size of the array list at the time of the definition. One bad thing about the array is, let's say if you define an array of size 10 and if you want to store 11 elements, you can't do that and you have to define a new array. Whereas in array list, you don't have to worry about it. It's dynamic. And we will see how to define an array list and how it's different from array with an example too. So other difference is array can store primitive data types. That means, like shown below, it can store primitive data types like int, whereas an array list cannot store an int value. It should be integer value. Similarly, you can have a char array, whereas in array list you can't have a char array. You can just do string arrays. We will see that with an example. An array list is the implementation class of list interface. If we see here, we defined array list using the list interface and we defined using the array list implementation class. So list is an interface and all these array list, linked list, stack and vector are the implementation classes of the list. We'll first start with array list and how to define and implement an array list. Let's jump back to Spring Tool Suite. I have my Spring IDE open here and if you have seen my previous video, this is the code from the previous video where I defined and declared an array. As I said, array has a static length, whereas array list doesn't have a static length. So it has a variable length. Let's see how to define an array list. Like I said earlier, list is an interface and array list is an implementation class. So you have to define array list using the list interface. List and the data type. As I said, you can't store primitive data types in an array list. So I'm doing integer array list example new array list integer. So this is how you define an array. So now I have defined an array list. The way you add elements into an array list is by using the add function. Add of 10. Similarly, you can add as many integers as you want. Let me copy this and add. If you see here, like an array, I didn't define the size of the array list because it's dynamic. I can go on and give like 100 array elements and it won't complain. Let me try to print that. And let me run it. So if you see here, it printed all the elements in the array list and it did not complain. Let's see what happens if I added an extra element into the array int array. The way we add elements into an array is using their index. So if I have to add elements into an int array, I have to give the index of each of it and assign a value. Now let me add more values into it. I have defined the int array of size 5. Let me go ahead and give like 6 elements and see what it says. The index would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me go ahead and run it again and see what it says. it gave me an exception saying array index out of bounds because I defined an array of size 5, but I'm trying to give 6 elements into that array. That is the reason it threw an error. Whereas for an array list, you don't have to define the size of the array list. It's dynamic, unlike array. So it comes very handy when you don't know the size of the element that's coming in. So let me go ahead and delete one element and let me run it again. Now the error has gone. So this is how we add an element into an array list. We will look into different functions that array list provides. So you can get the index of an element using the get index of that particular value. Let's say I want to know the index of this value 50. I want to know the index where that value 50 is stored in the array list. The best way to do it is, let me print that out. Index of number 50 is ArrayList got index of 50. Let me run this, and if I run this, see, I got the index of the number 50 as 3. So you might be wondering what would be the index of 90, because all the rest of the elements I gave are 90. So let's see what happens if I try to print the index of 90, whether it would return 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or the last one. So it gave me the first index of 90, whether it's here or here. So let me change the value. It will actually return the first occurrence of the object. It won't return the last one. There is one more function that you can use to do that. Add elements to a particular dot add of, you can pass 2 arguments, index 3 and the value you want to insert there. So I want to replace 50 with 300. Let's see what happens. So while we are printing this index of 50, we haven't replaced it with the 300. So it gave me the index 3. Then I replaced it and printed it. If you see that at index 3, 50 has been pushed to index 4 and 300 has been placed at that index. We are not actually deleting the element at index 3, but we are pushing to the right. The next function we will look into is remove function. Remove function is used to remove an element from a particular index. The way to do is, we call the remove function passing the index of the element. So I want to remove element 30. So I pass it the index 2. Let's see what happens if I run that. See, number 30 has been removed, and if you run this again, the index of the 50 is 3 already because we have removed the index. So it's showing up as 3, or else it would have been 4. So the next function we will look into is contains function. What does contains function do? Contains function check if the element exists in the array list. So if you want to find, let's say if you have a list of students and if you want to find if a student by name Raj exists, all you need to do is ArrayList dot contains of Raj. So let's see how it works. So I want to see if number 50 exists and see what happens. ArrayList dot contains of 50, and let me print that out. Contains number 50. So similarly, I also want to see if the number 1000 exists. In our case, there is no number 1000 exist, so it should actually return false. Let's see how it works. So I want to see if number 1000 exists. Let me run that. So if you see this, array contains number 50, return true, whereas array contains number 1000, return false. So it will remove the pain of you searching for an element in an array. Instead of you looping it over and check if the value matches to 1000, ArrayList provides a function called contains, which will check for you if the given number exists in the array list or not. These are some of the common functions of ArrayList that comes handy. Just to recap, we have looked into differences between an array and an array list. We saw how to define an array list and how it is different from an array. We have seen how to add elements into an array list, how to remove an element from an array list, how to use contains function, and how to use index function to get the index of a particular number in an array. I hope this helps. In the next video, we will look into hash map, which is one of the main data structure that Java provides, and that is the data structure you need to do any kind of work when you are in a real world. Thank you.